a lot of energy and a lot of information, and sometimes it can be information overload. So I want to be able to give you guys some time to process this. So we are in the next hour just going to go through the first part of Module 3, and then we'll combine the rest of it. If we run out of time, we'll combine the rest of it with the presentation on the 24th. No, but you guys have been doing really well, and I appreciate, your attention and your engagement. So we are on page 31, yes. Okay. So for this first part of the module, the first objective applies, and this is all about learning and planning. We basically look at, as human beings, we're just kind of wired to make decisions, how we make decisions, and a lot of times it's very intentional. And we like to make plans. The human mind likes to make plans, whether it's in your professional life, in your personal life, or whatever. We plan, we're planners. And we're constantly going about making choices about which goal to accomplish, or which one to set aside, and how we go about doing it. And you generally have a working life plan. Well, so does a community action agency. As a matter of fact, the way that your customers, that you know that your customers will do well, is by setting out a plan of how they can accomplish the outcomes that you have identified based on what their needs are. They've identified as their needs, and the priorities and the values they have for it. And so once the agency identifies what its mission is, and it has a clear and comprehensive view of what their customers and the community wants and the community they operate in, the next step is to create a plan that identifies the results of all of that. So on page 31, the first objective, participants understand that a community action agency plans for outcome, is what we're going to be covering in this first part of Module 1. The mission needs to be the guide for everything. Again, I can't emphasize that more and often enough, that the mission needs to be the guide. And the community assessment needs is the basis on which the agency is seeking to accomplish the mission. It is what informs your mission. And if you turn to page 32, we're looking at why plan, and you can use this space to just take a minute to jot down some of the reasons why you plan on a professional level. So does anybody want to share why they plan? Patty?
To meet deadlines.
Oh, yes, to meet
For,
deadlines.
efficiency.
Efficiency, okay.
Anticipate future needs.
Anticipate future needs, okay, very good.
Anticipate all contingencies.
Yes, anticipate all contingencies, okay. Did you-
Stay focused.
To stay focused, yes, yes.
As a guide.
As a guide, as a guide.
To unify agency vision and goals.
Yes, yes, very good. The unified agency vision and goal. Okay. And some of the other things is that it helps identify where you want to be in 3 to 5 years when you make a plan. And it allows you to consider in a very strategic and comprehensive way how your agency will address its anti-poverty mission. It also allows you to stay competitive as needs and community environments change. You know, it is very fortunate when a agency gets a planning grant so that they have the opportunity to really explore the feasibility of the funding and be able to plan for those contingencies of what may happen, you know, and if we do this, you know, maybe we need to incorporate that. And it also unifies agency staff, you know, as well as those other supporting customers. Bring them together for, as Alita said, focus, you know, to be able to focus on the mission and the goals of the agency. And one of the things that is very helpful is that it helps prevent mission drift. You know, mission change is intentional. Mission drift is like a boat, you know, unoared, unanchored, you know, from the harbor. You're just kind of at the whims of the current. And so this is the anchor, the planning. One final comment is if back in the 1998 CSBG reauthorization legislation, it covers and mandates that community action agencies plan. And that's where I know that you guys are aware that every 2 years we have to submit a community action plan to the state that outlines what are the needs of our community, how are we going to address them, and then what are the indicators by which we're going to measure our success. That is legislated. That's a part of the Reauthorization Act. And so being able to do that when you have identified the customer's needs through the community needs assessment, and then you write a plan from that, really helps us stay focused and compliance as a community action agency. So it's not unusual for nonprofit agencies or other community agencies to go after funds such as grant, only to figure out afterwards what they're going to do with it. You know, they may have a grant writer come in and write a wonderful proposal, and then the grant writer goes away and nobody knows what they're supposed to be doing. All they know is they have this big pool of money and they don't know what they need to do to accomplish it. So when you look at that, you have to look at, maybe you should have started with planning, you know, what are you planning for? So what do you guys do here as a part of your planning activities to start that planning?
We talk to our planner.
Okay, you talk to your planner, okay, that works. Okay,
Brainstorm with the management team.
Yes, okay, brainstorm with the management team, okay. Yes.
Look
Lynn.
at the history of the production from the past couple of years.
Okay.
To, you know, we have to commit to a certain goal per quarter to the
Okay.
state, and we want to make sure we follow that quarter
Okay,
and
so,
monitor that closely on a monthly basis.
okay, so look at the historical. And it may not only be, you know, historical results that we're looking at, but also historical expenses and expenditures, you know, because what we do costs money. And so we need to look at both angles, the fiscal and the programmatic, okay? And we suggest that the best way to prevent this tail wagging the dog is that you only apply for funding that facilitates your mission. Again, you have to ask, you know, this is a part of the planning. You know, you are planning to go after money that makes your outcomes happen. You achieve your outcome. Otherwise, you have to look at why are you going after the money in the first place. Drucker says never subordinate your mission in order to get money. It's all about your mission. So what we're looking at is Drucker question number 4. And if you guys have your book, the handout that I gave you, passed out before, and if you look on page 39 of that, you're going to see question number 4. And question number 4 asks, what are our, that's a tongue twister, what are our results? Okay. So that's what we're going to talk about this afternoon for the remaining 45 minutes that we have together. We're going to look at how do we define results, are we successful, how should we define results, and what must we strengthen or abandon. So if we could turn to page 34.
Can I interject something?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay, when you were saying that you've got to be careful about doing mission drift and going after money just for the sake of going after money, if you see something, if you're all community action oriented people, and you see some pot of money that has a project that's tangentially related to whatever you do, don't you think it would be, can't you go and if you have a consensus internally, is to sort of tweak the mission to include it, rather than considering it mission drift, actually integrating it into your mission? Because the mission statement doesn't have to stay static.
Well,
It just be revised every 5 years, does it? It could be...
Well, no, generally it gets revised. You only revise it when you need to revise it, and that's if your mission has changed dramatically. Like we mentioned this morning, we talked about Mark Dime, and their mission was to eliminate polio.
Well, that's pretty clear.
Okay, so that one's pretty clear. But if you add new programs and new services, then you may want to adjust your mission statement. But just remember that you can't do it in a vacuum. Your mission statement needs to be approved by your supporting customers. So if you go after, say, a pool of money that is tangential, a good example is the new Pathways for Fathers and Families grant that is open. It tangentially maps to what we're doing in that it has an employment component and a financial education component, but a lot of the other components, which has to do with counseling and marriage and child relationships and stuff like that, that's really outside of the scope of community action and the goal, not community action as an entity, but this particular community action agency. So we can look at if we're going to approach new programs that include a mental health component, and that's something that gets supported, we can do one or two things. We probably would go back to the commission and ask them to modify the mission that includes mental health services. And then that brings it tighter. But it needs to be a commission decision to do that. So it all depends, and it all depends on how valued that resource is. It may not be a good return on investment. If you end up investing $100,000 in order to work a $50,000 grant, it may just not be worth that investment. But you're right, mission statements are not static, but it has to be compelling when you look at making that change. And you've got to have a process through which there's an approval process and a voting process that allows you to make that change. Those are best practices. It doesn't necessarily work that way in all organizations. Sometimes the executive director or the president of the board just unilaterally makes a decision that we're going to change our mission statement. But best practices say, you need to have that discussion and that vote on it. And sometimes trying to get through that process isn't in enough time to be able to apply for the funding. Which is why planning is very valuable. Your mission needs to be driven by the needs that your customers identify and your community identifies. So if you're planning from the get-go in terms of what services, you're going to see the trends. And the trends should allow you to know what's far afield and what's more tangential, as you said, what's more related, that yes, we can incorporate this as a strategy or a way to facilitate the achievement of this outcome. Okay. So, if I could get someone to read the second paragraph for me, that's on page 34.
What he says?
What he says.
He says that we should look at both short-term accomplishments and long-term change.
Okay, and that's a part of that planning. I think, Stephen, that kind of even embraces what you were just talking about. You know, where do we have wiggle room, so to speak, before we actually have to make that change? So you need to be looking on short term as well as on long term. According to Drucker, in business you can debate whether profit is really a measuring stick, but without it there is no business in the long term. You know, as business is all about profit. But in the social sector, there's no universal standards for success. It doesn't exist. It's very localized, it's very individualized, it's very based on your experience, your strategies, and your customers. Each organization must develop these standards for itself. And they must do that by identifying their customers and what their customers value. And honestly be able to judge. How do you judge whether someone's life has been changed? You know, especially when you talk about those esoteric changes like self-esteem, self-confidence. You can tell sometimes on skills. You know, you either couldn't do it before, now you can do it. You know, but a lot of things, you know, that are the hallmarks of productive lives, you know, those self-assessments that we make are very difficult things to be able to measure. So identifying and documenting and using results is part of the overall management of a community action agency. We're mandated to do that, and it's good business practice. And while profit is a way of measuring the success of a business, we have to use a different measuring stick. We have to be able to measure the change. And that makes a different type of results that we have to look at. Drucker presents a case study of a mental health treatment center that was able to define specific results that enabled them to identify customer progress. So now we're talking about a mental health place, and how would you be able to tell if patients had changed? Well, they were not cured. You know, they still had mental illness, but they were able to hold a job. They were able to complete school or return home from an institution. And they no longer blamed demons in the closet and had reduced the number of and lengths of psychiatric hospitalization. So for this mental health hospital, they were actually able to define what results were, even though they couldn't identify that someone was cured, but they had changes in behaviors. Drucker reminds us that while we do not use profit as a measure, we need to be clear about what we will use to replace that measure. Okay. So now, just like we identified that there were two assessment data, quantitative and qualitative, we can identify results the same way. There are qualitative results and there are quantitative results. So your qualitative results are more intangible, and therefore they're a little harder to measure, but they're very important, such as what I mentioned before: improved self-esteem, empowerment or motivation, self-confidence. You know, how do you measure that? I can think of, like, for the peer mediation program, you probably maybe the kids have skills in mediation and being able to resolve conflicts, but how do you measure that change in their personal self? Because they're impacted by the confidence that they gain in being able to do this mediation. So how do you measure those kinds of change as well? And then it's improved quality of life. You know, what do we mean by that? How do you measure someone's improved quality of life? Quantitative results are the counts of individuals who have met an outcome. So that's number counting. That would be, say, 30 of 40 students enrolled in the peer mediation program completed their training and got a certificate. Or 24 of 28 pre-apprenticeship youth served or completed 520 hours of on-the-job training. So that's what we're looking at, quantitative results. Yes?
What is more, I don't want to say valuable in terms of quantitative and qualitative. As a measure, or as a
more accurate.
as a result, or more of an impact, what is more
Well, you can't really
Valuable.
you can't really weight them that way because it depends on what you're measuring. Okay, so if you're measuring change in self-esteem, you may get better information or better results from a qualitative measurement. It could be a survey that the youth, turns in saying, I feel more confident because I'm able to communicate better with my boss. It could be observational notes from the mentor saying when this kid came in, they were really shy, and now, they're talking to people at the counter, they're doing customer service and stuff. So we're trying to measure self-esteem. And then partnered with that, maybe we're measuring skill building with that youth. And so you give them a pre-test, do they know how to run a cash register? And then you give them a post-test after the training, and they show an increase in knowledge. That's all quantitative. But blended together, the qualitative and quantitative gives you a picture of the results of the change in this child's life that are based on outcomes that you're actually going to write. And it might be a little clearer because we're going to do some outcome writing that we'll be able to start measuring results too. There'll be fake results, but we'll start measuring that, and it might, and that'll be helpful. But they're both valuable, and they both, usually you try to marry the two of them. You have quantitative and qualitative. Like I said, qualitative is the story behind the numbers. Numbers only tell you what the face looks like, but it doesn't tell you the story behind the face. So, we're going to talk a little bit more about quantitative and qualitative results when we get to module number 5. But if you look on, page 43 and 44 of that little handout that I gave you. We look at, they have questions that ask you, how do you define results? And were you successful in achieving the results? And one of the reasons, and we'll talk more about how we define those, but what it looks at is determining when you keep something and when you abandon it. And sometimes, it's real hard. We get really married to programs that we have had for years and years and years, and yet the success is drifting away from the mission, or is not as what we call high impact, is not having the optimal change that you want. And so the time and energy and the money, when you look at it, going into that service, a lot of times maybe you're only having the service because is traditional for your agency, and not necessarily because it's beneficial for your agency. So when you look at the results, when you do that assessment and of an evaluation of the result, two things you have to look at. Do the results indicate that we should keep this program in service, that it's successful, it's achieving the outcomes that we want? Or do we need to rethink it, restructure it, or do we need to abandon it? And this agency was formed in 1979. So we've got 45 years. That's right? I have to ask the accountant.
35.
Thank you.
35.
No, 30 and then 15. That's 40, it's 45, isn't it?
It's 35,
30.
36 actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
Never mind.
What?
Never mind. I don't have my calculator up here. I do have my calculator right
Get your
here.
calculator.
35.
He makes.
So anyway, we've been around for a while.
That's a better.
I just embarrassed myself on camera. Anyway, so we've been around, or the agency has been around for a while, and there are some historical programs that I don't think we have any of them anymore. But there was one program that we had for a number of years, about 10 or 15 years, where the enrollment just never went up on the program. I think it was like a disaster planning program that we were involved in. And the return on investment wasn't there. And it was a hard decision because it was a favorite of the commissions. And the commissioners, reluctantly let the program go. Let the program, die its little death. Because it wasn't bringing about the service that customers were demanding, customers were valuing, and that the energy and the effort that was put behind it was actually bringing back a high return. So when you look at your results, you want the quality of results that's going to allow you to make that determination, and sometimes those are very hard decisions to make. You want to abandon if it's not productive and should no longer be a part of the agency, and you want to strengthen a program if its essential performances areas are weak, but you need to strengthen them. So think about it this way. You've got something that's sucking up resources but not being productive, and something that could be extremely beneficial, but you don't have enough resources to gear it up and strengthen it up. You need to do a resource shift. And sometimes that means abandoning programs. Okay, so on page 35, was there a question? 35, okay, in this book here. We're going to abandon this one for a moment, yeah. Okay, can someone read these paragraph that believes to believe? It's the second paragraph, third paragraph down.
I'll read it.
Okay.
To believe that whatever we do is a moral cause and should be pursued, whether there is success or not, is a perennial temptation for nonprofit executives, and even more for their boards. Everything is a good cause, but we cannot afford to continue where we seem unable to further the mission.
Okay, thank you, Lita. And could I get somebody to read the next two paragraphs that starts with, do we produce?
Do we produce results that are sufficiently outstanding for us to justify putting our resources in this area? Need alone does not justify continuing, nor does tradition. People in any organization are attached to the obsolete, the things that we should have worked but did not. the things that once were provided and no longer are.
Okay. And so the question has to be, what results do you want to achieve? Does your agency want to achieve? If you could please turn to page 36. Okay. Sometimes we use the word results and sometimes outcomes, but what we're talking about is the benefit. You know, what's the benefit to the customer or to the agency or to the community that comes out of this community action activity? And that change, the change is something that happens to our customer, and a lot of time we use the terms interchangeably. This is one of the things that when we talk about how we're identified as a community action agency, not through the funding stream, but through the intent, the intention of the agency. CSBG defines us as a community action agency, but it embraces every activity. Every activity that goes on within the agency goes to achieve the mission and the outcome. And so it's not about the funding streams, it's all about the outcomes and the needs that our customers have and how we come together as a community action agency to achieve those results. So we talk about outcomes, and there are different levels of outcomes. So one of the things that I'd like for you to do is to look at the bottom of page 36, and if I could get a volunteer to read the first type of outcome and maybe give an example of that type of outcome from their program.
Consider the difference in time frames in different situations. Short term, for a client in need of shelter may be this afternoon, while short term for someone obtaining basic job skills training may be 6 months. You will identify the change to be observed in a time frame that matches the situation. This may be characterized as short term, intermediate term, or long term.
Okay. So anyone have a program that they could identify in change over a time frame?
Over a time frame?
Well, weatherization, it's a long term, so all
Okay.
the efficiency measures that are installed
Mhm.
will last quite some time,
Mhm.
5, 10, 20 years. So that's a long term.
What's that?
That is
That
long-term.
carbon measure, that's based over time, right?
Carbon
Carbon
footprint.
reduction.
Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
Carbon per ton, I mean, it's like, isn't it for a period of time, like,
You could look, you know,
Yeah.
or just energy burden,
3 years.
the savings, the cost
Something like
savings.
that.
per year or something like that? It's
Mhm.
carbon produced per year or something like that, is that
Oh, that's the,
that measurement? But they say you have to have greenhouse gas removal.
Metric ton per dollar spent.
Yeah,
I don't think there's a year involved. I don't.
but the metric ton isn't like the second that you install the measure, the metric ton is over a span of time. So that's the long term. I don't know what that period of time is, might be per year, might be for 10 years.
And one of the things that you have to look is that you can establish outcomes that are independent of the funding source. The funding source may not dictate, you know, how you measure that or how you report it or whatever. But if our outcome is to provide safe and healthy homes to customers, particularly low-income customer, you may want to establish an outcome that they will have safe and healthy homes through weatherization as evidenced by decreases in this footprint. Is that what we're looking for? We want a reduction in that footprint? Or say, for instance, an increase in energy cost savings. And so maybe you weatherize the home, and in 3 months, maybe you might expect to see, a 5% reduction in utility bills. Maybe in 6 months, you know, they've learned more the house, they're getting acclimated in the house. Maybe you might see a 25% reduction in energy costs. And then what would you like to see in 12 months? If you were to go back and visit that customer, and that 12 month may be your long term, the 6 months may be your intermediary, and your 3 months may be your short term. You know, where do you want that customer to be at the end of 12 months in light of energy savings that they have received because you weatherized their home and all? And so that's a good example. The other thing would be Michael's, the IDA program. In increases in assets. So it's very easy to measure that, because if they're supposed to be saving $50 a month every month, at the end of 3 months they've got $150. At the end of 6 months they got $300. At the end of 12 months they got $600.
You're good, you're good.
Oh, I'm just a planner. But anyway, then you can measure that. So did they achieve that? How many people actually in the short term had medium asset acquisition? How many had more robust asset acquisition? How many achieved goal at the end of 12 months?
I
Yes.
just want to add what you just said, the
Mhm.
future 3 months, 6 months, 12 months on the
Mhm.
utility bill, did they save? The state is
Yes.
requiring that for the Lightwood contract.
Okay.
Client will need to sign authorization for the state to review their bills, starting from the
Okay.
day that they got the service 1 month after for 12 months to see
Okay.
what the difference.
Okay, so that is something that you can measure, you know, with through the state, and you can set targets, you know, what we call benchmarks for that. And as I mentioned, when we get into Module 5, we'll talk a little bit more about the complexity of measuring and tracking results and stuff. But for right now, you want to look at it as a progress over time. So can I get someone to read the second bullet and maybe give me an example? On page 36, change in status.
Situations may be identified at different levels of status. Residents of one public housing project may feel that they are safe, while those in another project might feel that they are in crisis, depending on the location, neighbors, and other environmental factors. Some housing situations can be considered thriving.
Okay. So when they use the term safe, in crisis, and thriving, we'll be talking about scales, outcome scales later. And those are levels of the scale that they're talking about. But how would you apply change in status to your pre-apprenticeship program?
Change in status.
Mm-hmm.
Younger people are receiving job skills.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. A good example, before they were in the program, before your intervention, they had no job skills. After your intervention, they have job skills. You know, it's a change in status. It's an increase in something. It could be an increase in something positive. It could be a decrease in something negative. But it's a change of where they were before and then now after your intervention. And the key thing is your intervention has made that change. Okay, so what about the third bullet? Get someone to read that.
Sure, I'll read it.
Okay.
Change in direction. A positive outcome indicates progress toward a goal. A neutral outcome may indicate stability or no change in status. And a negative outcome may indicate that the situation has changed for the worse.
Okay. And can you give us an example of that?
Well, either would be like a positive outcome would be that they reached their match savings goal.
Mm-hmm.
So they've been able to save.
Yes.
Where before they may not have saved anything.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So it's a change in direction from not being able to save to saving and all. So we've got 3 different levels of outcomes. We have a change in over time, we've got a change in status, and we have a change in direction. Okay, so let's keep those things in mind. If you turn to page 37, we're going to take a look at some of the outcomes for family, agency, and community outcomes. What we're preparing to do, and I think we will probably not be able to do this until the 24th, but it'll be homework for you, food for thought. Keep in mind what our need is, and I'll email that around to everyone. But take a look at the bottom half of this. This is goal number 1. And the difference of goal number 1 and goal number 6 are family goals. Up here where you see low-income people become more self-sufficient, goal number 1. Goal number 6, low-income people, especially vulnerable populations, achieve their potential by strengthening family and other supportive systems. The difference between goal 1 and goal 6 outcomes are that goal 1 describes movement towards self-sufficiency. It's the individual, the family, the person that is moving towards self-sufficiency. And goal 6 describes ways that individuals and families progress towards family stability. So I become more self-sufficient when I increase my job skills. It empowers me to get a better paying job. I can go to work if I have child care. So it's still an individual need. I got a kid, I need child care, but I don't have child care services. I need to have subsidized child care. So if that resource is available, if that support system is available in the community, I can become employed and continue to work because I've got that supportive services available. But it's still on an individual basis, or it's on an as-needed basis. So that's the difference between 1 and 6. They're both family, but 1 is about self-sufficiency and 1 is about having resources to stabilize you. So if I could get someone to read some of the examples of family outcome for me, that's at the bottom of page 37.
So that's for goal 6?
Mm-hmm. For
Just
goal,
the bullet points?
yes, the bullet points. Just for
First-
goal 6.
Okay, person's increased education or skills, person increase in family functioning skills. How many do you want me to read?
Just the 4, yeah,
Okay.
just 4 of them.
Person's increased ability to manage income, and person obtained, maintained, or improved housing arrangements.
Okay. And so if someone would read under goal 1, which was above that.
Unemployed persons obtained employment or self-employment. Employed persons obtained better employment or self-employment. Persons maintained employment for at least 90 days. Persons increased earned income.
Okay. So one of them is about self-sufficiency, which Olga read. The other one is about stabilizing the family. And generally what you'll see is strategies that are tied to that provide resources and support to be able to do that stabilization. So let's turn to page 38 and let's look at agency outcomes. And there are 2 goals. Agency 4, which partnerships among supporters and providers of services to low-income people are achieved, and agencies increase their capacity to achieve results. So now the difference between these 2 is one's about partnership and one's about internal for the agency. And when you look at partnership, we aren't looking at just how many partners do you have, but what do they bring to the table? What is the quality of that partnership? What is the relationship of that partnership? What do you leverage with that partnership that allows you to facilitate the accomplishment of your outcome and therefore your mission. So for instance, if you have a partner that is a business association, let's say a business with pre-apprenticeship or something like that, and maybe it's the Chamber of Commerce. But if the Chamber of Commerce isn't providing you with leads on businesses that would potentially participate, or isn't collaborating with you to get like a request for qualification out in the community, or isn't partnering with you to identify potential employers, that's not the kind of partnership that you want to count. That's not a quality partnership. So when we talk about bringing a list of your partners, you don't necessarily have to have, say, a memorandum of understanding with that person, but there's got to be more at the table than, you guys have heard of letterhead board, where you've just got the name of the person on the board because you want to make an impression as to the constituents that are on your board. You can have letterhead partners too. And if your partners aren't bringing anything to the table, that's not what this goal is about. This goal is about establishing relationships that allow you to facilitate your goal. The second one is your agency's capacity to deliver the outcome. So do you have the expertise? Do you have the staff skills? Do you have the leadership? Do you have the governance from your commission? Do you have the fiscal stability and the fiscal resources to be able to, do what you need to do in order to achieve your mission? Yes, okay. So then the next one are community outcomes, and that is on page 39. So goal 2, which is the conditions in which low-income people live are improved, and that's on a community level, because we've got a couple things that are talking about quality of life, and quality of life sometimes can be interpreted as a family goal, but this one is about within the community. And then the other one is low-income people own a stake in their community. So community outcomes are not individual outcomes extrapolated into a larger group of people. They're about, is not individual homes weatherized, or the number of individual homes weatherized, but is rather improved housing stock in the community. Two different things that you're looking at. One is having the availability of safe, affordable housing. The other one is about the number of people who are in those safe, affordable housing. And so it's about positive changes in the community. More health clinics would be, more after-school programs would be another one. Improved housing stock, or affordable housing, if you're looking at construction or renovation. So is what's going on, another one, we had transportation up here. What about more bus lines? Better public transportation, increased law enforcement, and public safety. Things like that changes and improves the quality of the community for the people who live in it. And then for number 3, this is about you engaging low-income people in advocacy and in decision-making about those issues that impact their lives. So these are how many low-income people would you have on the Energy Task Force? Actual people from the community that represents the community and would have a voice about what they think about rate changes for, utilities. What about, we had one, there was one gentleman that was a Project Bliss participant who was on the Fair Housing Council and served as a board member for them, and he was their low-income representative. When you look at community action and maximum feasible participation, community action agencies are required to have engagement with their customers about the services that we provide and the opportunity to be heard and to advocate. And so that also translates into policy making. Where do they make an impact? On the community action plan, when it goes before the board supervisor, there's a public testimony. It is important to hear the voice of the customers that receive the service about the services that they, receive. Now, we're not, you don't want to take someone that's been displeased with the service to speak before the board of supervisor. So you're going to have positive testimony that would be there, though there may be some that, there's this little old man. This little old man that comes to all the board of supervisors hearing, and he just makes it a point to make a comment about everything. And I've been there, and he's been around for a while, and he gets more cantankerous the older he gets. But anyway, I've been to the plan meeting where he's just had to get up and say something, about community action, and the board of supervisor usually just shuts them down and all. But you generally will get positive, but it is the right, and it is the part of who we are that we allow low-income people to have a voice. And so when you look at number 3, this is where you want to get some of your customers engaged. Okay, so what we're going to do, we've got about 5 minutes. We are going to stop at the 3 levels of community action outcome. And what we will pick up when we come into our next meeting is that we're going to be identifying some outcomes for this individual, for this family individual need. So if you want to write this down somewhere in your book, and actually you can go back to, say, page 37, and maybe at the top write down the need individuals lack job skills, and then start looking at what some of these outcomes might look like for addressing this need with families that they lack job skills. And we'll be able to start right off with building the next part, number 3 for outcomes for on the logic model. We've had a lot of lecturing today, a lot of talking head. Are there any questions that you have about anything that's been discussed today? You want more chocolate the next time? Okay.
More celery, more caffeine.
More celery, more caffeine, okay, we can do that. Well, my goal is everyone who gets a certificate in the ROMA training gets a Starbucks card, okay? So that's your incentive to complete the ROMA training. I've been promising this to Olga, Alita, and Lita and Richard and Mark for, oh, no, not you, this is.
I got an email
Oh, yes,
saying-
that's right, I got the email saying that, yes, okay, thank you for reminding me. You probably, well, when you get your certificate, you will get your Starbucks card and stuff, but for my appreciation for you guys and helping me with this process of getting certified. And one of the things is, if you want to take a few minutes, before you leave or before you leave today, we're going to leave these posters up and take them down tomorrow. You'll be here. And then we'll type up what's underneath each of these years and decades. I hope you don't mind if we shift some stuff around, because I see some worldly things up in the My Life stuff that might need to come down to worldly. And then we'll share and all. We won't try and guess who's who. and all, you know,
Right,
because
with
you
the
guys
mobile.
would never guess that I was only born
Right, with my
15 years
legs.
ago.
I don't want to share.
And all, but it's a fun exercise because it puts you in perspective with the history of community
Right,
action.
it's so
We have a very rich history and a very important history in the community. Communities could not survive without community action agencies because it takes more than just community-based and faith-based and public institutions to look after the poor and the needy. And our mission is dictated to eliminate poverty. We are the only social service agency that's legislated to do that. And it's a really proud thing to be a part of. And then know that there's 1,100 community action agencies across the country, all trying to make a better life for people who want to change. You know, some people say we'll never eliminate poverty, but we can eliminate poverty for the people who want to move out of poverty. We can help those people. And that's what we're all about in Riverside County. So thank you guys for coming today. I appreciate it. You know, Mr. Treats, don't forget the evaluation, because that I need to turn into my handlers. And, you know, please feel free, good